if we're settled on this topic, let's actually move on and talk about the Joe Rogan interview with Trump. So Joe Rogan did an interview with Trump. They sat down for 3 hours and they talked about a variety of different issues. I watched the whole thing. I don't know if you guys had the time to watch the whole thing. I'm sure you guys have seen at least a few clips of it here and there. And I told you guys to watch just a tiny clip of it at the before the show started. So hopefully you guys did that. But yeah, I'll give my opinion on the Joe Rogan interview with Trump. I think he came off as really personable. He came off as a reasonable person, and they just talked like human beings, right? And then there was a part about like wrestling as well, where they talked about wrestling, which again, they talked about non-politics related topics as well. Maybe you can argue that it's Trump and he's running for president and he's such a controversial person that everything he talks about is technically politics related. But, they talked about wrestling and stuff like that as well. So my impression of it is just that Trump is really good at talking. And if you actually give him the time of day, like if you're actually willing to sit down and listen to him with an open mind, which a lot of people on the left are not willing to, and I understand that. But I encourage everyone to have an open mind for either side, right, of an argument. But if you actually had an open mind and you actually watch the interview for 3 hours, I think you'll find that Trump is able to communicate his thoughts like a human being, which I think puts him in direct contrast with Kamala Harris, who I think this happened right after we did last week's show. So this happened a while ago, but we didn't get to cover it because it happened after we had already filmed last week's episode. So we would have talked about it last week, but let's talk about it this week, where Kamala Harris last week did an interview or did a town hall with CNN. And, being the left-leaning candidate, being the Democratic candidate, CNN is like the most friendly platform that you can go on, right? Because they're super left biased. I don't think that's up for debate, right? I think we can all agree that CNN has a left bias. So this should have been an easy interview for her, but she just didn't perform, right? So I'm going to play a little clip. And again, this video might end up being copyrighted or suppressed just because of these clips that we're using, but I really don't care because I think it's very important for us to just watch these clips. And I'm just like, I haven't altered the audio or anything like that. And it's just literally each candidate's description, right? So in the next clip that you're going to see, it's a video of Trump on Joe Rogan talking about his mistakes and just he's being very frank about his first term in office versus Kamala Harris when asked a question. I think it was around the border. She just completely freezes and just gives a very non-answer. So, but this is my opinion. Let me play you the clip and you can decide for yourself.
Military.
And how did you know who to appoint?
Well, I didn't. I had no experience.
You have something you can point to in your life, political life, or in your life in the last 4 years that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I mean, I've made many mistakes, and they range from, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well versed on issues, and I think that is very important. It's a mistake not to be well versed on an issue and feel compelled to answer a question.
As you guys saw on the clip, Trump implied that he had no idea what he was doing when he first became president, because during the interview, if you actually watch more of it, he basically implies that he didn't expect he was going to win in 2016. And when he did win, he had no idea what to do and who to appoint. And he ended up appointing a lot of people that were bad, right? Like even by his admission, he's like, I appointed a lot of people to high government positions that I wasn't supposed to, that just turned out really bad. So he, at least, like, I know we don't consider Trump to be a very humble guy, right? But at least in that moment, I think that was a really humble thing for him to say. It's like, hey, like, I made mistakes when I was president for the first term because I had no idea what I was doing, right? And the same is not true for Kamala Harris, who, can't name a single mistake that she's made, right? So it's like she went on this whole, I don't know, like, rant, or not rant, but like just whole word salad and just merry-go-round about just mistakes that she can't think of a single mistake that she's made. And it would be a mistake, excuse me, it would be a mistake to be forced to answer a question that you weren't prepared for, which is ironic because that's exactly what is happening at that precise moment when she was asked to name a mistake that she made. So it's just really sad that this is somebody that could potentially end up being the president, that she doesn't have the humility to just admit her mistakes, because I'm sure we all are human, right? We all make mistakes. And I'm not saying that to be a presidential candidate you can't make mistakes. In fact, I'm saying the opposite, right? Like Trump, he's admitted he's made mistakes and he's willing to own up to it. So I just think that that's like a very stark contrast. And even after this town hall was a big disaster for Kamala Harris, in my opinion. And even the folks on CNN, who are pretty much all left-leaning, right, and all more inclined, at least, to support Kamala Harris than they are of Trump, of course, even they had really negative things to say about the town hall. So the commentary was Kamala Harris focused a lot more on Donald Trump than she did on many of the specifics in terms of what she would do. And if her goal was to close the deal, she sure did not do that. And Obama's former advisor, or part of the Obama administration, this man named David Axelrod, says that Kamala has this habit of going to word salad city. And this is brutal coming from someone that's firmly lifelong in the Democratic camp, that would say that about their own candidate. So again, this is just a very stark contrast between Kamala and Trump, in my opinion. Lastly, for the Joe Rogan interview, people are saying that, like Joe Rogan, he's more of like, the libertarian kind of type, or he's more right-leaning in general. So like he's going to give Trump an easier time than he does Kamala. Well, what happened was Kamala could definitely go on Joe Rogan. I think she should, by the way, but Joe Rogan invited Kamala Harris to come on the podcast, the same as Trump. And apparently what happened was Kamala Harris's campaign requested that it only be 1 hour instead of 3 hours. And Trump sat down for 3 hours, by the way, and he didn't take any bathroom breaks, and he didn't even take a sip of water. Like, he just literally just raw dogged it for 3 hours. And to be fair, I think if Trump's willing to do that, I think it's only fair if Kamala Harris wants to run for president, she should do the same, sit down for 3 hours. But no, like, her campaign's like, we're only going to do 1 hour. And also Joe Rogan would have to travel to her, right? So for the Trump interview, Trump came to Joe Rogan to his studio in Austin, Texas. And Joe Rogan said that was a very important thing because he likes the studio setup. I think he said it was more like genuine and it's more comfortable. And it's just like it makes him feel comfortable, like having a real conversation, right? Versus the traditional format where if you go on someone else's territory, then you have to bring your equipment and set it up, and it's just like you throw off the vibe, is what he said. So he said that Joe Rogan said that getting Kamala to come to Austin was like a hard requirement, and she basically said no, or her campaign did. So basically that means that unless one of them is willing to compromise, and I don't think Joe is going to compromise, but I don't know if Kamala is willing to change her mind, but this Joe Rogan Kamala interview is apparently not happening at the moment. Maybe something could change. There's still time to do it if she wants, but at the moment, it doesn't appear that she's willing to make the same commitment that Trump did. So these are just kind of a few a few stories between Kamala and that illustrates the contrast between Kamala and Trump. So I was wondering if you guys had any comments on this, whether Kamala should do an interview with Joe Rogan as well, or is it not a big deal, or just your opinion of kind of their ability to just address questions and talk like a human being, right? Because I think Trump is a lot better than that. But maybe I'm super biased, and you guys can call me out if you think I'm being unreasonable to Kamala Harris. But I'm excited to hear what you guys think of this.
I mentioned it in our little group chat before. So I think Trump, he was in like Joe Rogan's home ground, and then they were probably talking for quite a while. I don't know when that part of the video was, the one that you just featured in the clip that you guys just saw moments ago. Maybe he like warmed up to the conversation and everything, and well, to be fair, he did admit to his mistakes, and like that's admirable, and he did it like with ease. And on the caveat to Kamala, I think she was on like live television and everything, and she was sort of put on the spots. And of course, like people can get nervous. We're all human after all. But I think on the other side of that table, I think she could have had like the proper PR training. And I mean, I feel like that's like a quintessential interview question, like not even for presidential like elections, just like life in general. If you're applying for a job, like what are your weaknesses? And I do feel like she should be able to answer that, like well. But I will admit she was circling around the question, and I don't even know if she got to an answer. She just like, it was like a little ring around the rosy, and then she got to an ending, but I don't know if it was like a firm ending. Well, Trump like admittedly admit his mistakes and things like that. Yeah, so I guess that's the comparison between the two. And then to answer your other question, okay, comments about Rogan. I think yeah, clear respects to Trump for probably on his like Air Force One, like flew over to Houston, went on to Rogan's home base, and then was willing to walk for 3 hours in the washroom breaks. I think that's really cool. He's like a man of the social sides versus Kamala. I think in order for Kamala to do well, I think she would obviously have to match that, like 3 hour podcast, uninterrupted, and fly on location, rather than her PR socials team like strict requirements. I don't know if that's the move necessarily. And I think I was looking at Polymarket. I think everything's more in like Trump's favor right now. So I think maybe perhaps if he went on Rogan's podcast and she like abided by going there, sitting down for 3 hours in the washroom breaks, she could have a better chance, because she can also, to be fair, warm up to the conversation too as well. Like Rogan podcasts seem like pretty homey and like pretty open and pretty deep. So I think to her benefit, maybe that live broadcast was a bit nerve wracking versus this conversation being more chillax. I have to watch the content, which I haven't yet like fully, but yeah, I think these are my thoughts. She probably just has to go on the Rogan show and warm up to the conversation. Maybe she'll do a bit better, but I mean, I can't say that for sure. So these are my comments.
I did watch a significant amount. Well, technically, I listened. I didn't actually watch. I listened to a significant amount of the Joe Rogan and Trump interview. So I do know. I did consume like 80% of it or so. I think there was maybe like 30 minutes left that I hadn't finished yet, but I did listen to most of it. So just to add that context, that I did consume a fair amount of it. I had a few takeaways on it. So just to start with Kamala coming on to Joe Rogan, I think that would be something that would be interesting to see. I question if it would be a success for Kamala. So I think on her front, she probably wouldn't want to go on it. And the reason for that is that I think that Rogan does have a degree of bias for more of the right-leaning talking points, where there's some things that he was clearly already pretty aligned with Trump on during their conversations, which I think may result in more of a combative experience between Kamala and Rogan. Obviously, Joe Rogan and Trump did not agree on everything, but I think that there were some pretty significant areas where they were aligned on that. I think there would be significant pushback from Kamala. Well, there were not nearly as many of those ones where they were kind of arguing on. And so I think that it would probably be a strategic error for Kamala to go on Joe Rogan. That being said, I think that it would be interesting. And I think that the big factor with Kamala on a podcast where we can kind of see more of who she is as a person, because I kind of feel like, I don't know about you guys or the viewers as well, but basically all I know and see of Kamala is talking points and political speech, blah 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 blah. It's all garbly-gook. It's nothing of significance with regards to her personality, her as a person. It's all just PR speak and all that. And I think that when you're having a conversation with another podcast person, it's much harder to hide behind that PR speech protection that I think she's basically all we've seen of her has been that. And so if she could come on one of these shows and be really charismatic and be really personable and someone that the people watching can relate to, I think that this would probably be a benefit to her. Now, the problem that I foresee is that I'm not sure if she is adept enough at negotiating that dynamic between personability, but also the political PR management that I think she is in a position where she has to manage to a larger extent than Trump, because Trump has kind of built his brand about being very blunt and like he doesn't really give a shit is really what the only way I can really say it. Like on the podcast, he was like calling people stupid and like incompetent and stuff for different items. And I think that a lot of people on the left would not like Kamala to be as aggressive, and she hasn't got the reputation for being as aggressive. And I think that it would be difficult for her to come out of it looking like, I feel like Trump, we kind of knew what we were getting and we basically got what we were expecting. I feel like Kamala, we don't know what we're getting. And if we don't like the personality that we receive, then that is going to be a negative impact. So I think that on her front, it's probably wiser to just not go for it, because I think that she is in a position where if she wins this election, it will likely be due to people voting on party lines and not for Kamala. And that's maybe just my opinion, but on that front, I don't think most people are rolling to the booths, cheering and chanting Kamala's name. I think that they are very much voting against Donald Trump if they are voting for the Democrats, but to a much larger extent. I'm sure there are some diehard Kamala fans, but I think that is by far the minority in the category. So I think that because Kamala's strategy is essentially going to have to rely on people voting on party lines, making herself undesirable to vote for would be something that incentivizes people to vote against her, even if they weren't originally. So by just not putting herself in the position for that, she may be better off. on that front. So it's an interesting scenario. And I mean, she doesn't have to go on Joe Rogan. She could go on a different show. And I know she did that one podcast that I forget the name of, but most of what I saw, Call Her Daddy. Yeah, most of what I saw from that, it kind of seemed pretty talking point heavy. It didn't seem as much like a conversation. It felt more like just another interview. I did not watch the whole thing, so maybe there was parts of it that were more conversation-esque, but I did feel like that one seemed more like an interview. And I think that with regards to her giving Joe Rogan all of these requirements for them to meet, I think that that's basically her way of getting out of saying, like, I don't want to go on Joe Rogan. It was, I'm going to make it as inconvenient as possible. So it's not me who's choosing to be not on Joe Rogan. It's, oh, we just couldn't make it work because I could only do an hour and he needed 3, and I couldn't go to Austin and he needed me to go to Austin, kind of thing. Even though, like, realistically, these are not things that could not be overcome. So there's that factor. And then on the front of just Trump on Joe Rogan in general, I think that Trump is definitely a character. I don't think he's a character that I particularly enjoy. I think that he's I don't find him particularly compelling. Like listening to him speak on a lot of this stuff. He says a lot of stuff where I do question the proof. And Joe was also kind of questioning the proof at times, where he was like asking about like proof that the election was rigged, etc., and like that they were like what were the causes of those. And I think these are areas where Trump was coming across as more like, I think he's kind of, it feels more like he's grasping at straws. He's just like, oh, there's all these reasons. And he came up with like a couple reasons, but I mean, I think it's difficult to say how much these reasons would have swayed people in actuality. And maybe they would have. Again, I'm not saying that there is not an argument to be made that there was like stuff that was occurring on the behind the scenes that was covering up like the Hunter laptop, etc. Like that the details on all of those. I'm not saying that's not possible, that this is stuff that is that was being covered up that resulted in a higher degree of votership for one side or the other. I don't think that Trump won many favors by making such a big deal about it. I think that at the end of the day, he probably should have toned it down a lot sooner and a lot quicker. That's the same thing. He should have toned it down, basically. And I think that he should probably concede he should have conceded far more obviously that he had lost the election. But I think that I don't think that was an area where he was going to be particularly convincing. So like I did listen to a majority of it. I think that the amusing thing was that I found myself more interested in what Joe Rogan was saying than what Donald Trump was saying, which I thought was an interesting contrast, because I feel like usually when I listen to something like this, I'm more interested in what the person being interviewed has to say for themselves. You know, I go on the iced coffee hour, for example. I'm not really there for Graham Stephan. I am there for the guest, and then like a little bit of Graham Stephan to ask good questions. But I'm really there for the guests. That's why I click on the videos, because I see they have an interesting guest. I don't click on the video because of Graham Stephan in that example. But in this instance, I did find myself more interested in what Joe was saying a lot of the time than what Trump was saying. And some of this may just be the way his cadence is. Trump tends to, the way he speaks, I feel like a lot of the time people are either really into it or really not. And I suspect I'm in the category of really not. It very much feels similar to like talking to like an elderly individual. And I think that's maybe to his detriment in regards to the election. From, I think a lot of people are valuing the age of the candidacy of the candidate over other factors as well. So like at the end of the day, I think that the fact that he went on Joe Rogan, I think was something that will boost Trump in general, because I think that he did come across as human. I think that's a big factor that we can't discount. Was like, I feel like you might not like Trump, but I feel like you can kind of see a human in there, even if you don't like the human. Whereas I feel like a lot of the time with Harris, you kind of see an ideology or like the party itself, not so much a person. And I think that's where Trump may have a significant edge in this going into this election, because I think that people do like to feel like there is a connection with the president, and I don't think people feel that with Kamala. And I don't even think that they necessarily feel that much of a connection with Trump per se. I think they just feel more of a connection with Trump than they do with Kamala, right? Like, I don't think this is a scenario where it's like, I think where it's similar to, I'm going to keep going back to Obama. I feel like people really connected with Obama to a larger extent, than they connected with, his opponents at the time, like Mitt Romney, etc. I feel like a lot more people connected with Obama, even, and a lot of people had a lot of respect for him. And I think that Obama did a really good job of seeming like a human, as well as having all these political ideas. Whereas Kamala is basically just political ideas at this point. And we haven't really seen a human side. And I think part of that is also that she has a tendency to stick to her teleprompter, like her lines. She has like rehearsed responses to stuff. And, this could be a coping mechanism for, managing being in front of all these people and answering all these tough questions. But it's clear to me that these tools are not making her as appealing as like an individual as someone like Trump, where he can kind of think on his feet a lot more and showcase that, and showcase how sharp he is. And it's not even, I think the main thing isn't even that he's like extremely sharp necessarily. I think that the contrast is really the thing that is working in his favor. So I think when we bring it all the way back down, I think this really ties into my kind of central theme going into this election, that the Democrats have put forward a fairly weak candidate, and that Trump has a significantly higher chance of being elected because of their selection. And I think that pretty much covers it for the whole 9 yards on that one.
Yeah, no, that was a very comprehensive go through. Thank you for that. And I pretty much agree with all of what you said back there. Again, people have different preferences as to whether they connect with Trump or not, and I get that. And some people are just, Trump derangement syndrome, never Trump. I get that. But I think if you actually genuinely watch the interview with Joe Rogan with Trump with an open mind, then you come to the conclusion that he's at least able to talk to you like a human being. Whereas, as you said, Tristan, it doesn't seem like, at least Kamala has not proven that she has a similar ability. And I'm not sure if you guys watch Game of Thrones at all, or if you watched the show when it first came out, when during the first beginning few episodes of season 1, where they're talking about like Daenerys and the Dothraki, right? So the Dothraki are like these horse rider people, like kind of like Mongolians, I guess, of the Game of Thrones world, where they have they braid their hair when they like win a battle or something, and then if they lose a battle, they cut their hair. So the longer your braids, the more battles you've won, right? And then Daenerys's older brother, who's I think his name is Viserys, and he wants to usurp, and he wants to get back the throne that the people in Westeros usurped from him. He was like trying to get the horse lords, the Dothraki, to be on his side, right? And then he's like, "Oh, they're wearing those braids. I want braids too." It's like, what's so great about these braids? And then Daenerys was trying to explain to her brother that, listen, like, you need to win battles. You need to earn those braids. You can't just like put on a wig, or you can't just decide to braid your hair and have people respect you. You need to earn them. And Viserys is like, I don't need to do anything. I'm the prince. I'm going to be king soon, and just like, respect me because I am your prince, because I was anointed. Right. And then Daenerys just like got mad at him because like, you have won no battles. That's what she said to his face, right? You have won no battles. You do not deserve those braids. And this is the exact same scenario that I'm seeing with Kamala Harris. She has won no battles, and she does not deserve to be president, in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is because, again, she was like a prince or princess in her case. She was anointed she won no primaries, right? She has not won any battles. She has won no battles, and she does not deserve the braids. She won no primaries, and of her debates, like, yeah, she did well during her debate, but she did so because she was the more professional and the more eloquent person, and she speaks to you like a person at Service Ontario, or the DMV for Americans watching. She speaks to you like a DMV employee, and I think it would be very sad if she got elected to be president because of that, right? Like, just put on a face and just pretend to be professional and just kind of snuck her way into the White House, I would say, if she actually wins. But Tristan, you were going to add something.
Yeah, I think actually something I was just thinking about was with regards to her doing well in the first debate. I think actually the fact that the first debate was so soon after her being chosen as the nomination was one of the big factors with her doing so well. And because of that, and the reason for that is that she kind of underlined her talking points there for the first time, and they were fresh, and we were like, oh, okay, that's new information. You're a middle class person, whatever, you were raised in a middle class family, great, I was raised in a middle class family. So the reaction to it, I feel like, was one that, this is fresh information, we're learning something new, she's being more personable, right? And this is something that made her more compelling at the time. The problem with that strategy, though, was that she just kept regurgitating the same talking points into all her future interviews. And I think at this point, everyone got very sick of them. And so I think we basically, it's just in one ear, out the other. Like, I don't want to hear that Kamala is from a middle-class family. I don't care. The first time, sure, the second time, okay, maybe the people didn't hear it the first time, but like the sixth, the seventh, the eighth, like it's just not very compelling. So I think that in retrospect, maybe her performance in that debate was actually maybe not that it was not as good, but I think that it was basically what they had and basically all they had, and they've just been repeating what came out of that, rather than kind of reorienting and going through some new stuff and really hammering the points where the Democrats are more compelling. Instead, they just seemingly focused on attacks on Trump and, at least we're not Trump kind of vibe, which I think is not compelling enough to win them the election.
Yeah, I mean, there's still, the election hasn't happened yet, so I guess there's still a chance that she could win. But again, I said this a little bit earlier, a few minutes ago, and I'll say it again. I would be incredibly disappointed with America and the American people if you elect this woman to be the president, and not because she's a woman, by the way. Don't cancel me. I would be disappointed if you elect Kamala Harris specifically to be the president, because she's just such an uncompelling person that does not seem to stand for anything, right? And I get that she's not Trump, but guess what? There's 8 billion people on Earth, and there's 8 billion people that are not Trump. And then in America, I know you have to be an American citizen. So America has 300 some odd million people. So you have at least a couple 100 million people to choose from that are not Trump. And I just don't think that that's like a good enough reason to make somebody the president. The fact that you hate Trump, like, I get it. You've said that, not you specifically, of your host, but I'm just saying, like, the audience members, right? The left. I get that she's not Trump, but I think if you ask yourself, if you dig deep into your brain and into your mind, and you think who should be the best person to lead the country, I don't think the answer is Kamala Harris either, right? Even if you think that it's not Trump. So this is just my opinion. And like, people are saying that like the left is always like, there's people trolling me on Twitter, be like, hey, like, wouldn't you be mad if Kamala Harris wins? Look, she's leading in Michigan now. Wouldn't you be so mad if she wins? So it's like, no, I wouldn't be mad if she wins. I would be disappointed. That was just like, the disappointed Asian parent thing, right? I would be beyond mad. Like, I would not be mad. I would be disappointed.